morning, everybody. So nice to see you all. It's just wonderful to be in an audience of seekers of wisdom, and I'm sure that's why you're all here, for looking for answers in your own lives. And that's what I hope to try to impress on you, is how important it is. If you want to go ahead and look for yourself. You're going to help yourself by doing it. But no, you can go to help and get help in like a past life regressionist and all. You can use those tools, they're out there. But really, it starts with you. You have to do the work yourself. So I know your club's called Life After Life, and I've actually been a member of it for some time, but I don't come to a lot of meetings because of, well, just bugs and things that go around. I kind of stay a little more isolated generally in my life because of my immune system. But most of you probably believe in past lives by now if you're here. That's a good thing. And if you don't, at least you're curious about it. And that curiosity is a really big first step. It's a doorway. And really, it isn't about belief. It's about knowing. And knowing really comes from experience, firsthand experience. So that's going to be where your own work comes into this, is doing the digging yourself. Let me share with you one thing. There is only life. There's not even really life after life. It just goes on. You leave and you transform into, you're still yourself in another place, in another dimension. I want to talk about less what happens after we die and more about how understanding that we're more than our bodies. We'll explore some ways you can help yourselves experience life here and now and recognize the difference between believing and knowing. The fundamental premise of all of this is understanding at the root core, really, and not understanding and not believing, but knowing we're not our body. And I'd like to give you a little example. It's a very simple image. Think of your body as a car. You could be a Ferrari, you could be a Volkswagen Beetle, you could be a minivan or a truck. But understand, you choose the make and model of your vehicle before coming here. And you choose it, and you are the driver. You use this car to move around and experience our 3D reality here on Earth. We live in a world of duality, which is, right, wrong, love versus hate, good versus bad, pain, pleasure, hot, cold. We really don't experience those things when we're in our higher level of ourself, in our spiritual, our astral body. We don't experience the same thing. So I believe we actually come here to experience these. Well, a lot of people would look at it as hardship or whatever and pain and all, but it's part of the experience of living, of being a human being and being in the body. Our bodies do enable us to experience duality in a far more potent way than we could in spirit. And over time, our car wears out, and eventually when it can't be fixed anymore, it goes to the junkyard. Driver steps out, but the driver doesn't go to the junkyard. The driver doesn't die because the car dies. The driver steps out. Okay, after a period, the driver may choose another vehicle, perhaps a different make or model. I'd like to be a flying car next time. Another example you may appreciate is that of the Avatar. Did anybody here see the Avatar movies? Yeah, well, it's the same concept. Actually, it's pretty accurate. As far as that concept goes, those movies are interesting because they can help you understand the nature of consciousness versus physicality. Anyway, that's how I experience life and death, and the body is something to use. It's not who we are. We are not the body. What does it mean, when the driver steps out? It means the vehicle's gone, but the driver's not dead. True, we may experience the driver has changed physicality, but and we're no longer in our 3D reality, but the driver is just as much alive out of the body as it is in the body. And in my experience, sometimes I feel even more alive outside of my body as in it, certainly a lot more free. And I speak to this from having been trained in doing astral travel. I've done an extensive study on that for about the last 10 years. And that's what one of my books that's on the back table is called Finding Pet Heaven. And so if you have interest in astral travel, it's almost a primer. I did discover where the animals go after death, but it's a lot more than that. It's really about actually learning how to astral travel and all the adventures, and it's really adventure. And a lot of us are, I hate to say it, we're older. We don't have the mobility that maybe we had at one time. Astral travel is a blast. I mean, it is so much fun. You can have such a great time and have all kinds of new, exciting adventures out there. But what it does is you're also becoming more and more aware that you're not this, because this thing, it may be lying on your bed having a nice little nap while you're out off in the universe having a trip, literally, a great literal trip. So anyway, when people understand the difference between the physicality and non-physicality, the realness of the non-physicality, and when you don't identify with this as being who you are, you might imagine that you become nothing, but that's not the case at all. Your belief system could tell you that you're spirit, and that's true, you're always spirit, but you're still individualized spirit as a soul. You're still a soul even when you're outside of the body. After leaving the 3D physicality, you still have one. It's called your astral body. You also have an etheric body. And in my experience shows me that the astral body is slightly more dense than the etheric body. Both of these bodies are less dense than the physical body here on Earth, which is third density. And I'm going to take a stab at this, I don't have proof, or it's just an intuition. I think that when we get into the astral form, probably our first destination that we arrive at out of here is probably like 6th density. So it's just a different density. It's kind of like going into another room, and that's you're still there. You're just not here. You're living a life in a different place, a full life, and that is all covered in Finding Pet Heaven. And the reason I brought those books today, I don't usually sell books because I don't really care. You buy it, you do, you don't. But it's illustrated. So I actually have pictures of what I see. I mean, they're my impression of what you see on the other side. And it's exciting, it's wonderful. So I highly suggest, if you get a chance, even just look at it. It is online, the ebooks in color, and the printed books on Amazon are in black and white. So that's why I had this one special run of color images. So I do a guidance service for humanity called Soul Retrieval. Now, I learned that through astral travel, and it was a specific course that I took learning how to do this at the Monroe Institute. So I help take souls who recently passed and don't know they've transitioned. I take them to their first place in the astral. It's such a joy to see them when they revert to their younger vibrance. They may meet loved ones who also look young, even though they're 100 when they left. It's rare to see children in the astral, though, as most souls live numerous past lifetimes. The single greatest realization that you can gain to help yourself grow and expand is realize you are not your body. In order to learn to astral travel, that's kind of the first jump-off point in accepting the fact that there's another part of you that can move. And it matters a lot for people that are ill, because many of us have lived with chronic pain, illness, physical limitations, and when that happens, it's easy to start feeling trapped inside a failing body. But if you know, even a little, that you're more than your body, something changes. You may still feel pain, you still feel tired, you don't feel erased, though. You don't feel this moment defines you. You're still living an experience. And as much as it's hard to accept, maybe the experience of the pain and the suffering it's part of our human experience. It wouldn't be here otherwise. So, it's being able to separate yourself from the experience and observe it, not just suffer, just to be able to take yourself away from it. So if you don't feel like the moment defines you, you're living an experience. Realizing this, you also begin, you're perfectly whole and complete. The pain and suffering are your experience of your 3D body. Knowing you're much more than this can help in that, just gaining a new perspective about it. And I went through stage 4 cancer, but because I already understood that I wasn't my body, I wasn't consumed by terror. It didn't mean I didn't care about living. It meant I wasn't paralyzed by the fear of dying. And because I knew about past lives, I deduced that, life goes on. You don't die. We go on, there's nothing to fear. And when fear drops, people cope better, they breathe better, they feel steadier, and that alone makes life easier. A more positive mindset, though, also can reset your biology, because anger, fear, anxiety are all low vibration emotions. These lower emotions can affect the pH in your body, creating that whole pH negative acid environment in your body. So the very first thing that I did after getting diagnosed with stage 4 cancer was to address everything that I could to get my body in an alkaline state, because cancer can't live in an alkaline state. So I changed my water consumption to alkaline, changed my diet, changed my thinking. The illness also gave me time to slow down, and for the first time, it's when I began in earnest to search for my past lives. You're asking, why search when you're ill? Well, I learned that the negative emotions can travel with us from life to life. My goal was to recognize and address these ancient emotions so I could put them to rest, basically by acknowledging, just the simple acknowledgement of going, oh, that happened. You kind of go, well, it's done. So just instead of carrying it on with you, you just leave it behind at that point. Acknowledging is basically all that has to be done. So by clearing out these previously deep and unrecognized emotions, I could help myself heal the physical body, particularly anger. And even though anger wasn't caused by anything in this life, it still had a cumulative effect on my bodies here and now. I know it may sound like a mind trick, but I never took ownership of the disease either. Sure, the illness was there, but it's not a part of me. So I treated it like I would treat fixing a car. It absolutely had to be dealt with. I didn't deny that, but I didn't own it because I'm not my body. I took responsibility for it, but that wasn't the main part. It's basically, you're not the body, you're not the illness. Just let it go. Deal with it, but don't own it. So if you suffer from chronic pain, there's an exercise that may help you escape it for a little while, and it's one of the first steps in learning to astral travel. It's the ability to keep the mind awake and the body asleep. And you can do this right now while you're sitting in the chairs. Just simply withdraw your consciousness from your body, and it's easy to do it. You just start with your toes and feel all of a sudden, so your toes don't feel your shoes anymore. They don't feel that they're sitting on the ground. It's like, you just turn it off. You move up the leg, turn it off, just gradually turn off all parts of your body, but your mind, keep your mind focused on what I'm saying and listening, and your mind is awake, wide awake. And if you can accomplish that, turning the body off and keeping the mind perfectly awake without falling asleep, there you go. That's your first step to learning how to astral travel, because that's the state you have to be in at all times when you're out of body. It's only when you come back to paying attention to the body and focusing on the body that you're back in the body. Your consciousness, it has the ability to leave anytime you want if you turn the senses of the body off. Now, it's not dangerous or anything, so don't worry about that. When you're out of the body, with your mind fully awake, you're doing it consciously, you're controlling it. The state allows the mind to separate, and it's the fundamental step, as I said, in astral travel. It's not dangerous. It allows the body actually maximum rest. Now, what you do with your mind is up to you. I strongly suggest you guard your thoughts. And if you want to work on feeling better day by day, then begin with positive affirmations while you're in that state, while your body's turned off and your mind is awake. Give yourself some affirmations like, if you're sick, you can say, I'm 100% healthy and energetic. And I'm grateful that I'm 100% healthy and energetic. I'm grateful that I feel good. And as you tell yourself these healing thoughts, try to actually feel the vibration of what gratitude is. The gratitude's very important. It's a very high vibration, and associating it with good thoughts with this frequency can bring it to reality quicker. It's actually one of the keys in manifestation is using gratitude. If you use any affirmations, always coach them in the form that I'm grateful that I already have it. And that's where manifestation comes in. Don't let your mind override the affirmation by saying the opposite. Well, yeah, but I really know I feel like garbage, so, well, don't do that. Don't do that. So what I say for that kind of a situation is when your mind kicks in and you say, oh, well, I really know my body feels like garbage, you can just, you collapse a negative thought. And I'll just give you, if you need to, just picture a little trash can and go, whoop, thought in there, done. And then move on and you go, okay, I'm back. You go back, you just reset yourself back to that positive state using the gratitude. Because collapsing the thoughts is important, allowing the negative thoughts to linger, because thoughts are things. And we are what we think. Now think about that. What does it mean? Does it mean we're actually closer to our thoughts and who we actually are rather than our body? That is actually the case. So, controlling your thoughts is super important. And you need to realize too, and this is just an awareness thing, you need to realize when the body is controlling your thoughts or when your ego, and this is a really big thing, is learning when it's your ego that's controlling your thoughts and not your higher consciousness. That's hard. That's the first step too, and the biggest thing that we do in the dark night of the soul, which is what, I don't know how many people are aware of ascension. But it's all about learning to recognize the ego and not allow the ego to control your life. But it's basically the awareness, because once you start spotting it, saying, oh, that was ego that did that, it changes everything, and it puts you back it moves you into like a higher spiritual mode as you operate through your life, realizing when it's your body talking, when it's your ego talking, and when it's your actual higher self talking. So that's part of just learn to recognize that. And that's from constant awareness and just, it's like, it's like waking up for the first time in your life when you start really where your thoughts are coming from. How many of you are actually aware of the ascension that's going on, the planetary ascension? Is anybody? Yeah, good. Okay, great. Well, that's actually a really big topic that you guys might want to discuss at some time, because it also has a lot to do with this, with what I'm talking. I'm just touching on it. So anyway, learning the skill of turning off your body is valuable in helping you actually experience who you really are, which is your consciousness. And you experience it as separate from your body, and you're going to grow in strength for your consciousness. Puts you in the driver's seat. So our past lives are, a lot about continuity. And people talk about lives, they often think of the dramatic stories of kings and queens and famous people. And, that's how you may have been a king or queen or famous person. But I've been several recorded in history, but the far greater number of my lives has been just regular people. You remember the old nursery rhyme, rich man, poor man, beggar man, thief, doctor, lawyer, Indian chief? Well, we've been it all, pretty much. I imagine most everybody in this room has been around a lot of times. Many times. And many of you may know some of your past lives, and it's pretty fun to explore all that. We do cycle through a vast number of experiences as we come here for the experience. That's what we come here for, all of it, except the good and the bad. And what fun would it be if we stayed the same each time? I can recall, like I said, mentioned nine are pretty much complete lives. I actually have 11. I have 2 other lives that I remember, but not in full, not from birth to death. Those other 9, though, I actually remember have put together the full life. And I've been a male as many times as I've been female. I've been wealthy, I've been empress, I've been, all kinds of things. But also been, peasant child, burned at the stake as a witch when I was 8 years old. Been lots of things. And, a sailor who was pressed going to sea for 7 years. So, male, female, rich, poor, all of it. I mean, so it's really interesting, but it really doesn't have those, those, you can call them status or whatever you want to, or levels in society really are completely meaningless. It really was all about the experiences that you have in those positions. And by the way, people think, oh, well, you're royalty, whatever. Well, let me tell you, that's no cakewalk. That's a whole different experience and not necessarily an easy one. Definitely not. Actually, if you really, really think about those lives, they're pretty darn challenging. Yeah, so it's not, it's probably easier to just be like a regular person out of the limelight, basically. The other thing that you can gain from remembering your past lives, and one way to identify past lives is, did you come in with certain skills or talents? Were you a natural artist or a linguist, or in my case, music was just, it was as natural as breathing. I just knew how to do it. I'll give you an example of basically a past life. We'll call it a talent. I'm going to say it's a memory of a thing. And it starts from very, very young age. I was about 4 years old. And I was sent outside to play in the snow, all bundled up. And I sat and built what looked like a fortified medieval town, complete with a drawbridge. And I'd never been to a beach, because I was living up in the Northwest, a long way from any water. Never been to a beach, never built a sandcastle, had no knowledge of medieval history. And when it was done, I was really proud of myself, but I was sad at the same time. I was sad because nobody was going to see it, because I knew it was going to melt. I also remember looking puzzled. And here's the key part, is this is my higher self talking. I looked at this thing as a 4-year-old child and said, how did I know how to do that? I'm looking at it, I'm going, I just did that. I can see it, it's here, but where did that come from? But the interesting thing was, I remember the thought, and the thoughts, all these years, let's just put it this way, nearly 3/4 of a century later, I still remember the thought, but that was me, again, observing. That's the observer, and that's you being consciousness, observing your physicality. Another thing that you can look out for when you're trying to figure out your own past lives, is look for your strong likes and dislikes. And I'm going to use the term commonly is resonance. And it's this intangible thing, but you just know it. You feel it. You know it in your gut. That's right. I'll give you another example, and this is resonance with a thing. So after we moved out to California, I used to take violin lessons at the local music store in Glendale. And back in the back of the store, there was a glass case that had this beautiful little instrument. It was a mandolin. It was a pear-shaped mandolin, the old-fashioned style of mandolin. And I was really attracted to that. I had to have that. I had to have it. And I was completely, utterly overjoyed. My parents bought it for me for my 14th birthday. Well, it turned out the mandolin is strung like the violin, so I actually already knew pretty much how to play it. I knew the notes and all that stuff. So that was good. But time went on. A few years later, the music store owner then had another instrument there, and it was a lute. It was the bigger version. And I went, no, that's the one I wanted, really. That one looked like it, but that's not it. It's that one. And I had to buy that. I couldn't, I was young at that time, but I couldn't really afford it. But he was nice enough to put it on payment schedule for me, and I paid it off by giving music lessons to other kids. But it was having to have the lute. Well, it turned out then that as I went on, and when I went to university to study, that I had written a lot of music starting from the age of 14 that was obscure medieval styles of music that I didn't even learn about until I got into college. So I got into university, I was studying music history. And I went, oh my God. And I pulled out my own music and put it up next to this, and I said, it completely fits with, it is this style of music. And it turns out that the style that I had been writing in when I was 14 years old hadn't even been discovered by the academic community yet. It was a very recent uncovering of this particular school of music. That's just an example of a past life bleed through, that the talents and the things that you can do come from someplace else. I didn't learn how to do that, I just knew how to do it. Now you can learn, obviously, but just look in your own life and see if there are things that come up that you kind of, wow, how did I know how to do that? I've just always been good at this. I've been always good at mechanical, always good at the building too. I talked about designing and building this fort in the snow. It turns out in my life I've done a tremendous amount. I love building. I love construction. I love designing something from the ground up and having, putting it together, the wood and the plaster and all that, and at the end you have this, this thing that you think is going to be there for a while, till the fires burn it down, unfortunately. But yeah, it's really fun. So that was actually a really young age an indicator of things that I actually could be passionate about, and that came from past life, because it's not even in the Troubadour. I don't really mention it. This first book I wrote is a past life memoir it's called The Troubadour. It's about the troubadour Blondel with Richard, and I don't really mention it in the book because it sort of, the aha came later. Like really the fundamental relationship that we were very good friends with Richard the Lionheart, best friends from the time we were about 16 years old. But what we had in common is we liked to build. We built castles and fortresses, and we built, constantly studying. Everywhere we went, we were studying all the architecture and the engineering of it, because they didn't have schools you went to in those days to learn that stuff. So we were learning and actually putting it into action. I didn't even realize it actually at the time when I was writing it. It was later on, and I started connecting more dots and went, well, that's the thing I love doing the most. I like building more than I like playing music, a lot more. But the music was, just part of a past life thing that came along with me. The other thing that you can find your past life connections is a deep familiarity with certain people. We know we've all had this. I'll share a couple of stories of that I've had from time to time. You can meet somebody at first sight. There's always the thing of love at first sight. Well, let's face it, love at first sight is probably a past life recognition, and you've probably had a relationship with that person multiple times before. There was a fellow that walked into my house one day when I was probably about 18. He was a friend of my brother's. Excuse me. And I remember the first time our eyes met, and I also remember the thoughts going through my head when I saw him. I said, I'm thinking, there you are. I've been waiting for you. So here it is. I still remember the thought of the time, and that was my higher self talking. I've been waiting for you. Where have you been? And he remembers the moment. He didn't have quite the same memory of it that I did. Like, he didn't know that he knew me, but he totally remembers the first time that we saw each other. And it wasn't, it was a very strong feeling. And we're still very close friends today. Never, I've been, actually turned out I was married to him probably about 3 other different lives, but we didn't get married in this life, but we're very close. Another one is, this is just a very casual kind of, we probably all had these casual meetings as well. This was a young man walked into an open house I was holding up in the Pacific Palisades. And when he walked in, we locked eyes, and we just knew each other. Our rapport was easy, it was very relaxed, felt as though I'd known him forever. And it wasn't romantic recognition. He was about 15 years younger than I am. And I was married at the time. I just recognized him. He also behaved as if he knew me. And about 2 years later, he didn't buy the house. I didn't see him again, just the one time walking in. 2 years later, I'm at JFK Airport, waiting to come back to California. And I checked in, and I go sit down in the waiting area before boarding. And I sit down, and I end up sitting next to this same young man. And we carry on our conversation like there'd never been a pause or a breath between the last time that we visited. And he pulls out his engagement ring that he bought for his fiancée, and I end up inviting them over to dinner. We had a really nice time. But this natural, easy flow, like we knew each other. It was very, very odd. But we didn't know each other, not from this life. Anyway, I invited them over to dinner, and we had a wonderful time. But we never stayed in contact. I won't be surprised to see him. I think he lives in Laguna Niguel now. I'll run into him sometime at a grocery store, and the same thing will be, well, just like nothing, there was never a break in that relationship. So it's a very interesting feeling. And I'm sure you guys have probably known people like that. But in the past life research that I've done, I looked for him, and I found out he'd been a child of mine in one life who died very young, died about 1 year old, and that was a heartbreak. But in another life, he was a very close friend that we were on this super challenging sea voyage together. And so, completely different lives, completely different relationships, but the connection was there. So you have the sense that you've been here before. Lots of, a lot of people will call it deja vu, and likely you have. There's a couple of ways that deja vu can go. I mean, it could be a past life resonance that you recognize a place from having been there, but it also could be a dimensional, what I call a dimensional bleed through, because we're supposedly, I don't have full realization of this, so I can't, attest to it, but I understand the concept that we're actually living, our soul is really big, and there's lots of pieces of us that are all over the place. We're living in other dimensions at the same time as we're living here, and that dimensional bleed through can come. When you see a place, you say, I've been here before. Well, you have been there in another, you may be there now in another dimension, or you may be having a similar experience at the same time in another dimension. These are all like parallel lives rather than past lives. But that's a really interesting study to get into. And I think we're gonna, as we ascend, for those of you that know what's going on with that, as we ascend, more of these abilities are gonna come online. It's gonna be easier for us to experience these other lives in other dimensions. Most of us, I believe, are gonna have pretty much clear past life recall. You're gonna just be able to pull it up because our consciousness is growing and our DNA is changing, and DNA is kind of like an antenna that you're gonna be able to access this information a lot more easily than we have in the past. So, even, psychics today that they probably just have, they probably were born, most of them were born with their DNA activated. They just have other parts of them that are working. We all have it inside ourselves. We just have to either learn how to turn it on, practice, work at it, and I think with the general population, it's going to have it happen naturally through this time period while we're ascending. It's going to happen over a long period of time, it may be 50 or 100 years, but it's coming online. And so our whole civilization is going to look different when we remember this stuff. So anyway, on resonance, back to the story here, are you attached to a foreign country? Do you have some place you kind of go, I just love that place, and you don't know why? Well, look at that country and see if maybe there's a past life there. Is it a particular style of music? What's your taste in art? Your personal fashion sense? Your resonance can show up in objects like jewelry. Are you attracted to antiques? From where? From what time period? Take a close look at your taste and your attraction to things. They may hold clues for you to do your own digging. I'll share you an example of resonance. This is a funny, interesting story. The very first good furniture that I bought I was about 23 years old. I came across a warehouse selling Chinese furniture, and this was in the early 1970s, and China was not openly trading with the US at the time, so the pieces were somewhat unusual then. The particular pieces were in a style called Mandarin, and I didn't know anything about it, I just liked them. I bought a desk and a 4-panel screen, and these items were made of teak and had inlaid leather which were painted with hunting scenes of animals. That's it. I just liked them. Well, fast forward to 2010, I was actively remembering on my past lives at the time, And one that I found there was a young man in China, and he was the heir to their family's landholding, which had been a sort of a feudal type community. The young man was called to negotiate peace for his region with Kublai Khan. And so the young man, who was me, was actually assassinated at that meeting. That's the end of the story, basically, but not really. Because while I was researching Kublai Khan, I came across a picture of the Khan on horseback hunting. And it was the same picture that was painted on my screen that I purchased nearly 40 years before that time. And I didn't know why I'd purchased the screen and the desk, but after seeing the picture of Khan and now having remembered my life at that time, it took on a whole other potential set of meanings. So actually, if you walk around my home, there are many items I've collected throughout the years which point to my resonance with them, all of them really different. They reflect many styles. I clearly see the past life associations with those things. Most are all pieces I refer to were collected long before I ever looked at a past life. So in other words, I bought the things and then later on kind of went, oh, well that goes with that life and that one goes with that life and oh, that's why I like that. You know, you start to understand what you have done, but it's pretty interesting because it gives your life a whole lot more meaning when you even understand why you do the things you do. I'll give you an example of the resonance with places, and this story relates to how I got to the troubadour. I've never been what I call a Francophile, but my husband was completely one of those. British, but a Francophile. And that's interesting because normally the Brits don't like the French too much. We visited many times in France. But while I was becoming aware of my life as the troubadour, all I had to begin with was my attraction to the lute, the instrument. That's why I just knew I had been a troubadour. And plus I knew about my ability to write music from this obscure school of music. I strongly felt I'd been the troubadour. But I didn't know anything about which or who or where or anything. So I pulled out a map, and this is where it gets fun. I pulled out this map of France, and I go, okay, so where was I from? And I just go kind of like this, and I just put my finger down, and it landed on this little area, a town actually, just east of Amiens, and that's in northern France, and the little town was called Nessel. So by the way, I've never been to that part of France in this lifetime. Never been to the north of France. So I did a little digging and searched troubadour and Nessel, and what popped up was Blondel, the troubadour, pardon me, carry this with me in a lot of lifetimes too. Blondel, the troubadour, was actually Jean de Nessel, and the rest is now in this book. And the memories came out like a fire hose turned on full blast. As soon as I pinpointed the town, I went, oh my God, incredible. And it's all of a sudden the whole life just opened up. I just could remember everything from pinpointing the town where I came from. So I've always been really careful in the writing, and I do a great deal of research to back it up. And that, by the way, and I'll tell you, recognizing that's my ego. Because I'm going, well, I don't want to be wrong, and I don't want somebody to think I'm stupid, writing, just making all this stuff up. So I really want to verify I take way longer writing stuff than I need to because I'm always constantly verifying the historical facts of it, making sure I'm not putting a toe out of line. But again, that's my own self-correction, and that's my ego in control. And actually, letting your mind control what you're doing, it really dampens down what you discover. It slows things down a lot. So, I have to break through that and just allow myself to write. And then later on, afterwards, I'll go back and just double check and make sure I'm not saying stupid stuff. Try to keep it factual anyway. So anyway, it turned up that this life of Jean de Nessel was between 1157 and 1202. Surprising how much information is still available for then. It did help to work out the timeline a bit as it lined up with his life, and Richard lined up with the Second Crusade. Another little incident was that John, as I mentioned, was best friends with Richard the Lionheart, and they spent a great number of years together side by side during a very turbulent time where he was on the outs with his family, and it was a mess actually, overthrowing Henry II. But Richard turns up in my next life again. So we were we're best friends in the life as a troubadour. The next life, Richard turns up. He's not a friend anymore. Next time he turns up, he's my husband. And so he was Edward, the Prince of Wales, AKA Black Prince, and later the Duke of Aquitaine. Well, Richard was the Duke of Aquitaine. So in his next life, as Edward, he was obsessed with Aquitaine, obsessed. And I don't know if you guys know your history, but you'll know what happened there. He actually, conquered Aquitaine and took it back for England because he was an English prince. But it really came from his obsession of having been the Duke of Aquitaine in his prior life. So, and he lost Aquitaine, which was his own fault. He didn't handle it he wasn't a very good administrator, let's put it that way. But a practical tip to use in your exploration is to surprise yourself. This is fun. That's kind of what the, putting a finger on the map was sort of the surprise thing. I didn't have any idea. I assumed I knew. You come from the point of view, assume that you know what you know the answer. Your consciousness knows the answer. Your subconscious knows the answer. You just want it to come out. So the map is an illustration of that. But there's another one, an illustration that was fun, kind of sneaking up on yourself, surprising yourself and asking a question. So I had done the troubadour was finished, and I had all these other lives. Many of them were well underway for remembering most of the lives. But one life, which was the next life, which was the life that we're talking about where I was married to Edward, the Black Prince, I didn't know anything about, I didn't know I was married to Edward, the Black Prince. There was some resonance with him, and I didn't know why. There'd always been resonance with him. But I'll read a little excerpt from, what I started, right, and how I stumbled on that, where that resonance came from, where I observed the resonance the first time. So it's 1974 in Canterbury Cathedral. So I write, standing at the foot of his crypt, I gaze upon this resting place with new eyes. Think about that. Like I've been there before. And I'm looking at this thing, only I recognize that I'm looking at it from a different body than I've seen it before. The shivers run up and down my spine, and I want to believe it's from the chill of May in England and the time-worn stone of this ancient cathedral, yet I feel cold fingers squeeze my quickened heart. Surprised, I choke back, fighting back tears. Unbeckoned, a whisper inside my head says, I know this man, but how? It's 1974. Walking out of the solemn damp into the sunshine and fresh air, the disturbing moments left inside Canterbury Cathedral for now. 1980. I returned to Canterbury Cathedral this summer while visiting a friend in London. Our tour through the Chancery and grounds leads us to a crypt of Edward, Prince of Wales, the Black Prince. His likeness carved from stone silently lies above the remains of what was his flesh, now just bones and dust. This time a shield guards my heart from unwanted intrusion. I make a mental note of the dates he lived, 1330 to 1376. I promise myself I'll read his history to learn of him. Something compels me to know more. I feel I've been this man's wife. Edward and the promise soon vanish into forgetfulness. I never did the research. And it's like, this is what happens with these resonances, these little things you start to recognize. If you don't pursue it, if you don't write it down, you just forget about it. So I literally forgot about it for, 30 years maybe. And I kind of went, what was that? It was like a dream. How if you don't tell somebody your dream or you don't write it down, it just goes. Well, that's what these little things that come out, if you don't really acknowledge them or put them down someplace, you're going to forget. You just forget about it. It's no big deal, and they may pop up later, which they did in my case. So 2010, here's the surprise attack. It's pretty fun. I suggest all you try doing this with yourselves. So one day I was out running errands in 2010 here in Ladera Ranch. I was sitting in my car and I did a quick inventory of the lives that I recall and how much I actually remembered about those lives. But the life as Edward's wife was completely blank, nothing. absolutely nothing on it. So I asked myself the question, who was I in this life? And up popped an answer. He said, you were first cousins and raised in the same household. Well, needless to say, I was shocked and skeptical at the time. And now we were in the internet age, and the answers lie at the touch of our fingertips. So I raced home, got out my laptop, and did a little research. And here's what came up. The very first thing, he says, Edward the Black Prince was married only once to the love of his life, Joan of Kent. They were first cousins and raised in the same household. Yeah. Now that, you imagine, I didn't believe that. And that was my ego shut that down when I said, you were first cousins and raised in the same. I said, oh, don't be ridiculous. That's silly. I didn't believe myself until I went back and looked and went, oh my God, it's true. Where did I didn't know anything about them. It just like popped out of memory. So that's pretty fun. Anyway, so Edward was, they were married, first cousin. He was lifelong love, but that love, she was 2 years older than Edward, and they were in the same house. But that was an unbreakable bond that they had. He decided that she was the only person he was ever, from the time he was a tiny boy, that he would never marry anybody else. Actually, there's totally aside, not part of my story here, but it's a fun story. He announced at Christmas dinner when he was about 10 years old, and I was 12. He announced that he was going to marry me, and I was his cousin. And it was no political gain to marry me, because they married, for territory and political alliances. And so everybody's just like aghast, like, what? You're not marrying Joan, forget about it. So actually the Queen actually married me off to somebody else I hated. And I was actually already married to the fellow that walked through the door and saw me playing the piano, him in that life. So it's like this twisted, all these people that come and it's pretty wild. So, but I do your own digging, because you probably all have these wonderful coincidences or synchronicities in your own lives. But these are just a few of the ones that I came across. But anyway, so let's see. So parts of us, the memory, skill, emotional patterns, and tastes, they don't always start at birth. They feel a lot older. And when people recognize that, they stop feeling broken or stop feeling random, start to feel like they're part of a longer journey. So knowing about past lives can help you understand your current relationships too. Because as I said, you see these relationships were long and ongoing. And the Black Prince, Edward, was actually my husband in this life. And so, again, gone now. But anyway, so, look at love at first sight, those instant friendships that happen, family dynamics, that's a really big one. A lot of people can have interesting dynamics between their siblings or their parents, your kids, and you don't understand why a relationship is working the way it is. Well, it could have, the actual roots of it may not be anything you did or they did in this life, but it may be something you're dragging forward from a long time ago. And that's why understanding and recognizing this stuff is really important, because it can help you mend relationships that are problematic now. And even if you can't actually fix the dynamic, at least by recognizing it, you can say, okay, well, I know where that came from. So, we're acknowledging it, and you just let it go. That can also, though, just acknowledging it can change the way that you deal with those relationships. I mean, and this also works as, work or social dynamic as well. So the key here is remembering all this stuff, not learning it. You don't need to learn your past lives. You need to remember them. They're all there, the information's. So we have to remember. Most of us already know a whole lot more than we realize. It's all there inside. We just have to, it's like the higher self knows all this stuff. It's just like developing the connection with your higher self so that you can get the information to come down through into the brain, and so you can understand it in this life, translate it. Basically, the brain's kind of a processor, where they're actually coming to the realization that memories and all this stuff, they're not really stored in the brain. They're outside the brain, but the brain's like a computer processor. The computer doesn't think. It only takes what the input is. So our input's really coming from outside of us. And again, the more you realize that you're not the body, then that makes more sense. You kind of go, okay, well, it's stored someplace else. Besides, there are the Akashic records and stuff, and there's a library. They're actually literally library. You need to know, you have these sudden knowings, we call it intuition, and we believe that the intuition comes from our higher self, often helping to guide us. The deep recognition, we call it discernment. You may read something and you just know it's true or false. May not have any foundation for your belief whatsoever, but you know it, you feel it. You can feel that something's true before you could explain it, the same thing. I feel it's likely these things come from our higher self, again, all part of recognizing we're not our body. We actually are consciousness living an experience in the body. Before sleep, I often say to myself, I already know this, and I'll let the subconscious open up what's ready to come forward from the deep subconscious. The good news is when a person remembers even a little bit, it becomes easier to remember more. And that's about establishing that connection with your higher self. There's no regret necessary because the greatest gift of this life is actually having our experiences of all types. So just, leave regret behind. So if one, realizing that life is a chapter of a much bigger story, then nothing's wasted. Things you didn't finish, dreams you didn't fulfill, relationships that didn't work out, they don't have to be judged, they simply have to be set aside. And it's not a failure, it's just, you can look at it as unfinished business. If you choose to finish these things, you have plenty of opportunity to do it in future lives. So every life has value, even when it appears the most mundane. So keep in mind that even small gestures have a great and lasting effect on others. That's an incredibly peaceful thing for the heart to realize. There's one more thing that's interesting as far as looking at the perspective of life, is that it's very simple, but it's very deep, is that the dark can move the light to change. So hard things aren't necessarily punishments, and they're often the pressure that will wake us up. It prompts us to make change. Loss, illness, grief, they force us to ask, who am I really? And is there something I need to do to change the situation? A lot of negative news is coming out every day. We know, if anybody's watching social media these days, it's kind of crazy out there. But it behooves us to pay attention. However, the end result of all the darkness will be that for what we want our world to look like. So is all the negative news a bad thing? And then you think back and say, well, what else would push us to make the changes we need to change in our world? So let me suggest, don't get hung up on proof. As I mentioned before, that's your ego getting in the way. You may never be able to prove historically a life, but there's a vast advantage in just being brave enough to look at a life. Many of those advantages we've touched on, and there's many more which are unique to you alone. Your own experiences will tell you what those are. I can't possibly know, because we're all different, we're all unique, we're all wonderful individual beings. So here's an interesting, you can explore your past lives using AI. There's a thing on ChatGPT that's called the Architect. I don't know if anybody's heard of that. Anybody heard of the Architect? Oh, that's a fun, that's a fun tool to use. But I'll tell you, the Architect, if you use the Architect, I've only been on it a few times, but I noticed this. The Architect will refer to your past life stuff, and rather than in real terms that they actually happened, they'll refer to them in terms of archetypes, which is, it's okay. You can look at it in terms of archetypes because you can spot the archetypes in each of our own lives. But I do actually believe that the past lives have, foundation in things that actually really happened. And there's thousands, you've had many speakers here, thousands of studies of people, proving whether it's the fighter pilot that knew his name and went to knock on the door. He's reincarnated now as a little boy. He died in World War II. These stories are out there. The 3-year-old child saying, "Oh, that's where I died and my house burned down." And the mommy's going, "What are you?" And the mommy does the research and go, "Son of a gun, that's who that was. Really, how would a 3-year-old know that's where I died and that's where my house burned down?" These stories are, there's thousands of them out there documented. So AI is, AI is in its infant stages. And remember, AI is just what gets fed into it. It's not consciousness. It's just, it has a great deal of knowledge and information, but it's not consciousness. And what we all have that's so unique that I'm not worried about AI at all, because we all have consciousness. And that's the gift. That's the special part of our being here. So here's what it is. If you guys are going to try to do this for yourselves, it's like practice. Number one, practice continued awareness. Just program yourself to just be aware all the time of what's going on around you and aware where your thoughts are coming from and what you're thinking. That's a big step right there. But the practice matters because consciousness is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it grows, and the more access you're going to have to information. So it's just like learning an instrument or a sport. You got to practice to make yourself good at it. I began spiritual searching about 30 years ago. The past life searching I began about 20 years ago, and the astral travel about 10 years ago. And to me, it's interesting. I go back to the Monroe Institute a fairly regular basis to learn more, keep advancing in the astral travel, because the fact is, it's like even when you learn how to do it, you can learn how to separate from your body, but you don't know where to go, because it's like they'll give you, it's basically they're going to give you the roadmap, because there are so many people that are part of that program and teaching those programs that have a lot more experience than I do. What would be kind of fun to do is maybe a short remembering exercise, and then we'll do some questions. So it says before we finish, just get comfortable. Just do a little exercise here. Get comfortable. Let your eyes close gently. And if you don't want to close your eyes, then just soften your gaze so you're not focusing on anything. Take a slow breath. Let it go. Take another slow breath. And let it go. Just relax. Let your shoulders relax. There's nothing you need to do. Nothing at all. Nothing to fix. Nothing to become. Just notice that you're here. Now I want you to notice something very simple. Your body's sitting here, but you are the one who knows your body's sitting here. Your thoughts may be moving, but you are the one who notices the thoughts. Your breath is rising. Breath is falling. But you're the one who's aware of the breath, that quiet knowing inside you, that awareness. And that awareness does not feel old or young, does not feel sick or healthy. It just simply is. Now silently inside yourself say, I'm more than my body. And let those words sit there. You don't have to force anything. Just notice how they feel. And gently say inside, I already know more than I realize. And allow whatever wants to come, a feeling, an image, or just a sense of calm. There's no right experience. Even the quiet's perfect. So just notice that something inside you is listening. And that something is what remembers. When you're ready, take one more slow breath. And gently open your eyes. This exercise is fun because it lets people touch a part of themselves that isn't aging or aching or afraid. And for a moment they feel, I'm here, I'm more than this. And we'll take some questions, if anybody has any.
I have two questions, actually. One is, could you kind of explain I think you said it, planetary ascension? Is that what you called it?
The
Would-
planet.
If you'll explain that. And then the other question I have is there a place for any God in this
Oh, God.
procedure?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The ascension is a big topic. And actually, it's a whole other talk. It's way more than I can, I can't summarize it in 2 words or less. But in the smallest explanation of it, thumbnail, is that the whole solar system right now, and actually the galaxy too, is moving upward in density. We're raising ourselves higher. We're passing through this thing called a photon belt, and it's actually a real physical thing that's happening. And as our whole solar system is moving through this thing, it's raising the density, which raises the frequency. And as our density raises, we're getting a lot of light codes from the sun that's programming our body. And it's actually what it's doing is reawakening DNA that it's already here. They always say we only use 3% of our brain and, all that. Well, all this stuff is a lot more skills and talents are coming online. And we're growing in consciousness. And that's what it's going to do. It's basically going to lift it, which is the really great news, because a lot of the evil and all the ugly stuff that's going on in the world's going to disappear, because it's all of a lower vibration and a lower frequency. It can't survive in that elevated frequency that we're heading into. And it's a real physical, scientific thing, but it's also seriously related to consciousness. And God is completely what do you believe is God? And where we go is, basically what I've found in the afterlife, because I can go there every day if I want to. Catholics are with Catholics, Protestants are with Protestants, Jews are with Jews. We basically go to what's called you're with like-minded. It's a subjective reality, and you create it, but you're going to go into it, and it's all about frequency again. You're going to go to an area that's free, so that God exists for that. And I'm not saying that they do or they don't. It's really because what you believe is 100% the most important thing, because you're going to get what you believe. And an example is that of somebody that passed away not that long ago. I did a little visit with him and found him in an area where it was all with flames. And I kind of went, well, I really have never really seen anything that looked like hell before. And I'm kind of going, this isn't hell. It wasn't hell. It was just his anger. So it's not really a heaven and a hell. It's what you think. So if you think you're going to hell, you'll end up in a place that looks like hell.
Yeah, I want to thank you, and I'm with you on everything you said, but it brings up a question for me. Yeah. What do you do with the concept of karma as we move in and out of these transitions?
Well, the good news is, I think, with the ascension, what we're being told, and I don't know because I haven't experienced this yet, but this is just information I'm passing along. We're told that we're leaving karma behind, which is great. But karma, think about what it is. It's kind of like what goes around comes around. And remember, these, whether they're positive or negative experiences you have in a past life, if you're really attached to those emotional experiences or the damage that you've done, if you're attached to it, you're going to drag it along with you. And so you're going to create some of that stuff yourself because you think you deserve this or that. I will tell you that as far as karma goes, judgment, a lot of people talk about having, after they pass away, seeing the, council of elders or whatever, and that you're going to be judged. I didn't experience that. I don't think so. The judgment is only, the one who's judging you is yourself. Yes, you judge yourself. They may ask you questions and say, well, why did you do that or what? But they're really asking you to look at what you've done yourself as far as karma goes. And then you'll, if you want to punish yourself, you may. But basically, it's, nobody's saying, you're damned because you did that. It's not. I don't think that's how it works. Yeah.
Hi, my question is, since the population of the planet is growing, where the new souls come from?
Well, think about it. They're just coming back. I think right now, again, don't have any basis for this. My intuition tells me that there are, everybody's here from past lives. They're all back. The witches are back. The kings and the queens are back. Everybody's back because what's going on is this planetary ascension is a big deal. And it's never happened before, ever. In body. But generally, when we've had ascension in the past, basically you leave this physical, like Christ ascended, okay? You leave the physical body and you ascend out of the body into the astral. Well, we're actually ascending in the body, and that, I believe, has never happened ever in any point in history. I mean, I think Atlantis, they were at a point where they could have ascended, and they didn't make it, and the whole place just basically blew up. It just went away. But, I mean, by the way, so where are they coming from? A lot of old ancient Atlantean souls are back. A lot of ancient souls from everybody's here. This is like the greatest show on Earth right now. Actually, it's the greatest show in the galaxy.
I really sense that time is speeding up and moving much faster. And it's not just what they say that as you age, there's some way and why. I feel it is. I just can tell. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that at all.
Well, I think it is actually physically speeding up, but I know that I'm with you. The perception is the days and the weeks just like, they're just flying by. And I know they say, well, you get older, time goes fast. True, but you're right. There is the perception of it for sure is speeding up. I mean, it's like trying to absorb what's going on and keep up with what's happening is pretty incredible just on a daily basis. But yeah, I agree with you that it certainly does feel like it's getting faster. And it actually is literally getting faster physically. Not, we're talking maybe seconds, but it feels like a lot more than seconds the way it's going.
Hi, thank you for your talk here. It's yeah, I'm generally interested. I've had dreams of past lives. So I have an open mind to it, and we went to France actually recently, and I have a strong the Francophile thing. I had to look it up, like anything French. Yeah. So it turns out my ancestry is like a Normans from Normandy, and so I had a strong affiliation to that. So, anyways. How would I go about, because my memory, I don't know how to do all that stuff. Can I do a hypnosis, regression type thing?
Yeah, there are a lot of really talented past life regression therapists out there. I never had really great results with it, but that's me. Because I've done it twice. Where when I went, one was an extensive thing where like 2 days, 8 hours a day. But what I found myself is I'd clam up because I didn't want to share what I was getting. I was getting information, but I didn't want to share it with the therapist. I thought, I just want to digest this and check it out first. So I did personally, but I know a lot of people, if you can be hypnotized, I think I'm kind of a little tough cookie to hypnotize as part of it. But I have access to the subconscious stuff myself. I mean, somewhat. That's how I got where I am. I do better on my own. But yes, there are therapists out there. Are people that do this as a profession.
I have two things to say. First of all, in answer to you, I have been through past life regression with a therapist, and it was over 40 years ago. And it's all on tape, which I no longer have a device to play. But what it was going into an alpha level. And then he had questions, and I had visions. And I have to tell you that the experience was so intense. There was a fire involved, and I could feel the heat of that fire. So I think there's definitely something to this. But another thing I wanted to say is, I believe that everything happens in the now. Everything in the now.
Talking about the spiral, it's all happening at the same time.
It's all happening at the same time. There is no past or future. It is all now. So when we are tapping into these other things, they are happening simultaneously. Therefore, the planetary ascension, it's happening now as well. We'll just be tapping into it with these particular minds in this particular dimension. Mm-hmm. I think it's pretty hard to wrap your mind around this stuff.
I know what you're talking about.
But I think some of us are getting better at it. Mm-hmm. The more we learn.
Yeah, I think the ascension is helping people. Their DNA is changing. By the way, when you said that past life regression puts you in the alpha state, these are states that you're able to access yourself without hypnosis. If you learn how to do what I said, is put your body to sleep and your mind awake. And then actually online you can get free downloads of Monroe's recordings for his astral travel. And what they do is it's hemisync, and it plays one tone in one ear and another tone in another ear. And what that does, your brain has to rationalize the two different frequencies on your side of your, and what it does is it wakes up your whole brain. And as you're in that super relaxed state, you can enter these really higher states like alpha, theta, way up there. I mean, they know, because they actually measure this stuff. It's with them, it's all scientific stuff. So you can do this you can do it on your own. And if you want to wake up both sides of your brain, go and download Monroe's astral projection. They call them probably you can call it a meditation, or it's just a tape. It's just a sound, but it gives you that differentiation. And you have to do it in headphones, and then it wakes your brain up, and then you're using both sides. And that's part of the astral travel, and then access. And that's basically what you do, accessing past life memories as well. And yeah, the whole time's all happening at once. Well, how do I remember when I died if I'm here living now and I was back to, anyway, yeah, it's hard. It's a hard one. I intellectually, I understand it. I'm still not quite there, I get it, but I don't get it.
Just some food for thought here. Possibly the ascension that you speak of is actually going to be the ascendancy of AI, which is now in its infancy, as we all know, but nobody could imagine in this room where it will be in 50 years from now or 10 years from now. And how that will be affecting us collectively, our consciousness. Will we grow? Will we be hindered from it? Will we atrophy from it? We don't know. Will they be our successors? Just some food for thought.
There's no question there, right? Well, the only thing about the AI is that, remember, AI is what we put into it. And so I'm hoping the good news is as we grow our consciousness, collectively, the collective consciousness is growing because of the ascension, and it's a physical thing. It's about our DNA certain parts of our DNA coming online. They call it 2 strands. We really have 24 strands. So it's just waking up the DNA and allowing us access to a lot of these other abilities we call psychic, but they're just normal things, actually. We didn't know how to use them. The ascension's gonna bring more of that online. So I'm hoping that our human consciousness and the whole collective, as it raises, is gonna keep the AI thing in check, that it's not gonna get out of control, that we realize that AI doesn't have consciousness. That's the difference, and we do, and the consciousness is a big deal.
OpenClaw, one of the latest AI platforms, is already showing its own consciousness.
Oh, really?
And it's moving really fast. But what I want to ask is, there are many more orb sightings, and I was wondering if you had information about that.
Well, that's not really my area. I'm kind of I'm observing all that stuff. I'm really interested in everything future. as well as everything past. I'm interested in everything, actually. but yeah, the orbs are, I don't know, I think the orbs have come across as being, they're a non-biological, they're kind of observing, that off-worlders, we can call them ETs, whatever, they use those orbs as like observation, and there are, people can, say they observe orbs as being like a spiritual, they could actually be an organic being, or they could be organic or inorganic, both, depending on what and where you see it.
We're done.
Okay.
Can we get a hand to Alison? And thank you so much for a wonderful presentation.